The rain battered the diner's windows, blurring the neon glow of the open sign into a hazy red smear. Inside, Ethan Cole sat rigid, his fingers tracing the rim of a cold coffee mug. His eyes locked on the man across from him, James, the ghost of his past, now flesh and blood after 9 years. The weight of those years pressed against Ethan's chest, threatening to crack the facade he'd built since the day he walked away. Ethan had been 19 when he first met James at a community college art class in rural Ohio. James, with his sharp cheekbones and quiet confidence, had a way of making the world feel bigger, brighter, like a canvas waiting for color. They'd spent stolen nights in James's beat-up pickup, sharing dreams under starlit skies, whispering promises they swore they'd keep. But Ethan's family, devout and unyielding, saw their love as a sin. When they found out, they gave him an ultimatum: leave James or lose everything. Ethan, young and terrified, chose survival. He cut James off without a word, buried his heart, and moved to Chicago, where he built a life that felt like someone else's. Now, at 28, Ethan was married to Sarah, a kind woman who deserved better than his half-hearted devotion. They had a son, Noah, barely 2, with curls that reminded Ethan of James's unruly hair. Sarah knew Ethan's truth'd always known, but she loved him enough to believe they could make it work. Until tonight, when she'd asked him to meet James, the man she'd learned about in fragments, the man Ethan had never stopped loving. James leaned forward, his voice low but steady. 9 years. Ethan. You didn't call. Didn't write. I thought you were dead. His eyes, still that piercing green, held a mix of anger and something softer: hope. Maybe. Or just exhaustion. Ethan wanted to reach out, to bridge the gap, but his wedding ring felt like a shackle. I couldn't, Ethan whispered, his throat tight. My family, they would have disowned me. I was a coward. He glanced at the diner's counter, where Sarah stood with Noah, pretending to adjust the toddler's jacket. She'd insisted on this meeting, her voice trembling as she'd said, "We can't keep living a lie, Ethan. Not for Noah's sake." James followed Ethan's gaze, his expression softening at the sight of the boy. He's yours? He asked, and Ethan nodded, guilt twisting in his gut. James deserved to know why Ethan had vanished, why he'd chosen a life that felt like a betrayal of everything they'd been. But before Ethan could speak, Sarah approached, Noah in her arms, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. James, she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. I'm Sarah. I know about you. And I know Ethan's been lying to himself for years. She paused, glancing at Ethan, then back to James. I can't do this anymore. I want a divorce. But Noah, he needs his father. Both of you. Ethan's heart stopped. The diner spun, the clatter of dishes fading into a dull roar. Sarah's words hung in the air, a plea and a challenge. James's face was unreadable, his hands clenched on the table. For 9 years, Ethan had hidden his truth, but now it was unraveling, and the life he'd built was crumbling with it. The rain slowed to a drizzle as Ethan's mind raced. He'd spent years running from who he was, from the love he'd buried. James had been his first everything, his first kiss, his first heartbreak, his first regret. Now, James sat across from him, a stranger with familiar eyes, and Sarah stood there, offering a future Ethan hadn't dared imagine. A future where he could be honest, but at what cost? Sarah set Noah down, and the boy toddled toward Ethan, oblivious to the storm brewing around him. Ethan scooped him up, his son's warmth grounding him. I don't know how to do this, he admitted, his voice breaking. James's gaze softened, and for a moment, Ethan saw the boy he'd loved, The one who'd promised to fight for them no matter what. Then we figure it out, James said quietly. Together. Ethan's breath caught. The diner felt smaller, the world outside irrelevant. He'd spent 9 years hiding. But now, with Sarah's courage and James's presence, he had a chance to rebuild not just for himself, but for Noah. The question was whether he could face the truth he'd run from for so long. As Sarah stepped back, giving them space, Ethan realized this was only the beginning. The road ahead would be messy, filled with guilt, fear, and the weight of choices made and unmade. But for the first time in years, he felt a flicker of hope, a chance to be the man he'd always wanted to be. For his son, for James, and for himself. The next morning, Ethan woke to the sound of Noah's giggles, a stark contrast to the storm in his mind. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling of their modest Chicago apartment, Sarah's words from the diner echoing, "Noah needs his father. Both of you." She'd slept on the couch, leaving Ethan to wrestle with the weight of her offer. Divorce. Freedom. A chance to be with James again. But freedom came with strings: responsibility, judgment, and the fear of failing the one person who mattered most, his son. Ethan dragged himself to the kitchen, where Sarah was feeding Noah oatmeal. Her face was calm, but her eyes were red-rimmed, betraying a sleepless night. "We need to talk," she said, not looking at him. Ethan nodded, his stomach churning. He'd spent years avoiding hard conversations, but there was no running now. "I meant what I said," Sarah continued, wiping Noah's chin. "I love you, Ethan, but I can't keep pretending you're all in. It's not fair to me, or to Noah." She paused, her voice softening. "I want you to be happy. And I think James is part of that." Ethan's throat tightened. Sarah's selflessness was a knife, cutting through his guilt. "I don't deserve you," he said, barely audible. She gave a small, sad smile. "Maybe not. But Noah deserves a dad who's honest with himself." They agreed to start the divorce process, but Sarah insisted Ethan meet James again before making any decisions about Noah. "You need to know what you're choosing," she said. "Not just for you, but for him." Ethan knew she was right, but the thought of facing James again after 9 years of silence felt like walking into a fire. That afternoon, Ethan drove to the park where James had asked to meet. The Chicago skyline loomed in the distance, a reminder of the life Ethan had built to escape his past. James was already there, sitting on a bench by the lake, his dark jacket blending into the autumn leaves. Ethan's heart raced as he approached, memories flooding back, late-night drives, stolen kisses, the ache of leaving James behind. "You came," James said, standing. His voice was cautious, but his eyes searched Ethan's, looking for the boy he'd known. Ethan wanted to apologize again, to explain the fear that had driven him away, but the words felt hollow. Instead, he said, "Sarah wants me to raise Noah. With you." James's expression flickered surprise, then something deeper, like longing. "She's incredible," he said. "But what do you want, Ethan? You've been running from that question for years." Ethan looked away, the lake's ripples blurring as his eyes stung. "I want to be a good father. I want Noah to grow up knowing he's loved, no matter what. But I don't know if I can be what you need, too." James stepped closer, his voice low. "You don't have to have it all figured out. But you have to stop hiding. From me, from Sarah, from yourself." He hesitated, then added, "I never stopped loving you, Ethan. Even when I hated you for leaving." The confession hit Ethan like a punch. He wanted to close the distance, to hold James and erase the years between them. But fear held him back. What would his family say? His coworkers? The world he'd built was fragile, and being with James meant risking it all. They walked along the lake, talking about the past, James's struggle to move on, his years in New York, the art career he'd abandoned after Ethan left. Ethan shared fragments of his own life, the pressure to marry Sarah, the joy of Noah's birth, the constant ache of living a lie. With every word, the gap between them shrank, but so did Ethan's certainty about what came next. As the sun dipped below the horizon, James stopped, turning to face Ethan. If we do this, if we try to raise Noah together, it's not just about us. It's about him. Are you ready for that? Ethan thought of Noah's laughter, Sarah's sacrifice, and the weight of his own choices. I don't know, he admitted. But I want to try. James nodded, a small smile breaking through. Then we start slow, one step at a time. As they parted ways, Ethan felt lighter, but the road ahead loomed large. He'd hidden for so long, but now, with James back in his life and Sarah's blessing, he had a chance to rebuild. The question was whether he could face the world as his true self and what it would cost to try. Ethan spent the next week in a haze, balancing work, Noah's bedtime routines, and the divorce papers Sarah had quietly placed on the kitchen counter. Each signature felt like a step toward freedom, but also a betrayal of the life they'd built. Sarah remained kind, even encouraging, but her silence during dinners spoke volumes. She was letting him go, and it hurt more than Ethan expected. James texted daily, small messages that felt like lifelines, coffee tomorrow, or saw a kid's book Noah might like. Ethan replied cautiously, afraid to hope too much. They met again at a small cafe, this time with Noah in tow. The toddler babbled happily, oblivious to the tension between the two men. James was a natural, making Noah giggle with silly faces, and Ethan's heart ached at the sight. This could be their future, but it felt too fragile to trust. I told my sister about you, Ethan said abruptly, stirring his coffee. James raised an eyebrow. And she called me an idiot for leaving you, Ethan admitted, a faint smile tugging at his lips. But she also said, she said our parents will never accept this. Us. The word felt heavy, like a stone dropped into still water. James leaned back, his expression unreadable. You don't need their approval, Ethan. You're not 19 anymore. You have a son. A life. You get to choose now. Ethan wanted to believe him, but the fear was still there, rooted deep. His parents' voices echoed in his mind: abomination, shame, sin. He'd spent years trying to be the son they wanted, but it had cost him James. Now, with Noah watching him with wide, trusting eyes, he couldn't afford to make the same mistake. Their conversation shifted to practicalities, co-parenting, living arrangements, the logistics of a life neither had planned for. James was patient, but Ethan sensed his frustration. I'm not asking you to have all the answers, James said. But I need to know you're in this. Really in it. Ethan nodded, but doubt gnawed at him. That night, he called his sister, Emily, needing her blunt honesty. You're scared, she said, not unkindly. But hiding didn't make you happy before, and it won't now. Noah deserves to see you whole, Ethan. Not half a person. Her words stayed with him as he tucked Noah into bed, the boy's small hand clutching his finger. Ethan thought of James, of the life they could have, and of Sarah, who'd given him this chance at truth. The next day, he invited James to the apartment, a tentative step toward building something real. James arrived with a toy truck for Noah, and the three of them spent the afternoon on the living room floor, building block towers and laughing as Noah knocked them down. Sarah watched from the kitchen, a bittersweet smile on her face. Later, as James left, he brushed Ethan's hand, a fleeting touch that sent warmth through him. "This could work," James whispered. "If you let it." Ethan wanted to believe him, but the world outside their bubble loomed large. At work, rumors were starting, whispers about his divorce, questions about the man he'd been seen with. Ethan brushed them off, but each comment was a reminder of the life he'd built to fit in. Could he really dismantle it for a chance at happiness? As the week ended, Ethan faced a choice: invite James to Noah's upcoming birthday party, a public step that would signal to everyone, family, friends, co-workers, that he was done hiding. The thought terrified him, but Noah's laughter, James's steady presence, and Sarah's quiet strength pushed him forward. He texted James, "Noah's turning 3 next week. Come." James's reply was immediate: "Wouldn't miss it." Ethan stared at the message, his heart pounding. This was his first real step toward a life he'd buried for 9 years. The fear was still there, but so was the hope, fragile but growing, that he could be the father Noah needed and the man James deserved. Noah's 3rd birthday arrived with a flurry of balloons and a cake shaped like a dinosaur. The small backyard of their apartment complex was filled with neighbors, a few of Sarah's friends, and Emily, who'd driven in from Ohio. Ethan's stomach churned as he scanned the crowd, waiting for James. This was the first time he'd invited James into his world so publicly, and every glance from a neighbor felt like a judgment. James arrived with a wrapped gift, his smile easy but his eyes cautious. He fit in effortlessly, charming Noah with a new set of toy dinosaurs and making small talk with Emily. Ethan watched, torn between pride and panic. When a co-worker asked, "Who's the new guy?" Ethan hesitated, then said, "An old friend." The lie tasted bitter, but the truth felt too raw for this crowd. Sarah pulled Ethan aside during the cake cutting. "You're doing fine," she said, her voice gentle. "But you need to stop looking like you're about to bolt." She glanced at James, who was helping Noah blow out the candles. "He's good for you. And for Noah." Ethan nodded, but the weight of the moment pressed down. His parents had declined the invitation, their silence louder than any words. Emily had warned him they'd react this way, but it still stung. As the party wound down, James lingered, helping clean up while Noah napped. The backyard was quiet, the setting sun casting long shadows. "I saw the way you looked at me today," James said, stacking paper plates. "Like you're waiting for the world to end because I'm here." He paused, his voice softening. "I'm not asking you to shout it from the rooftops, Ethan. But I need you to be okay with us. With this." Ethan's chest tightened. "I'm trying," he said. "It's just, everyone's watching. My coworkers, my family. I keep thinking about what they'll say." James set the plates down, stepping closer. "Let them talk. You're not living for them anymore. You're living for Noah. For yourself." He hesitated, then added, "For us." The words hung between them, heavy with possibility. Ethan wanted to reach out, to close the distance, but fear held him back. Instead, he nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know." That night, after James left, Ethan sat with Sarah, the divorce papers now fully signed. "I'm scared," he admitted. "Not just of losing people, but of messing this up. With James. With Noah." Sarah reached for his hand. "You won't mess it up if you're honest. Noah needs to see you happy, Ethan. Not perfect, just real." Her words stayed with him as he lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The next day, he called James, asking him to meet at a quiet bar downtown. Over beers, Ethan opened up about his fears losing his job, his parents' rejection, the judgment he'd face as an openly gay man. James listened, his presence steady, grounding. "I can't promise it'll be easy," James said. "But I can promise I'm here. For you. For Noah. For whatever this becomes." Ethan felt the walls he'd built start to crack. He reached across the table, his hand brushing James's. A small but deliberate act. For the first time in years, he didn't pull away. The bar's hum faded, and it was just them, two men trying to rebuild what time and fear had stolen. As they left the bar, Ethan's phone buzzed a text from his mother. "We need to talk about Noah's party. Call me." His heart sank, but James's hand on his shoulder steadied him. "You don't have to face them alone," James said. "Not anymore." Ethan nodded, the weight of the past still there, but lighter. He was starting to believe in a future where he could be himself, not just for Noah, but for the man he'd never stopped loving. The call with Ethan's mother was worse than he'd feared. Her voice was cold, clipped, as she demanded to know who that man at Noah's party was. Ethan tried to explain carefully, vaguely, but she cut him off. "You're confusing Noah," she said. "This isn't what we raised you to be." When he hung up, her words lingered, a reminder of the rejection he'd always feared. Ethan told James about the call over dinner at a small Italian restaurant, Noah asleep in a stroller beside them. James listened, his jaw tight. "They don't get to define you," he said. "Not anymore." But Ethan saw the flicker of hurt in his eyes, the weight of being the reason for Ethan's family strife. "I don't blame you," Ethan said quickly. "This is on me. I let them control me for too long." He reached for James's hand, this time in public, his heart racing but steady. A few heads turned, but Ethan didn't care. For the first time, he felt the freedom Sarah had urged him toward. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Ethan and James started spending more time together, taking Noah to the zoo, the aquarium, simple outings that felt like building a family. Sarah moved into a new apartment nearby, staying close for Noah's sake. She and James developed an easy rapport, their shared love for Noah bridging the awkwardness of their situation. But the world wasn't as kind. At work, Ethan's boss pulled him aside, citing concerns about his personal life affecting his performance. The words were veiled, but the message was clear: being open about James was a risk. Ethan held his ground, but the encounter left him shaken. He confided in James that night, expecting frustration, but James just pulled him close. "We'll figure it out," he said. Together. Their first real test came when Ethan's parents demanded to see Noah. Ethan agreed, but only if James could come. The visit was tense, held at a neutral coffee shop. His mother barely looked at James, her focus on Noah, while his father's silence was deafening. "This isn't right," his mother finally said, her voice low. "Noah deserves a normal family." Ethan's temper flared. "Noah deserves love," he said, his voice steady. "And that's what he's got. From me. From Sarah. From James." He stood, taking Noah's hand, James at his side. As they left, Ethan felt a weight lift, even as his heart broke. He'd chosen his son and James over the approval he'd once craved. That night, James stayed over for the first time. They lay in bed, Noah asleep down the hall, the quiet intimacy a stark contrast to the day's tension. "I'm proud of you," James whispered, his fingers tracing Ethan's jaw. "You stood up for us." Ethan kissed him, soft but sure, the first time he'd let himself feel without fear. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. As they drifted to sleep, Ethan realized he was building something new, not just a relationship, but a family, one grounded in truth. The next morning, Sarah called with news, She'd been offered a job in Seattle. "I want to take it," she said. "But I need to know you and James are ready to raise Noah full-time." Ethan's heart raced. This was the moment he'd been preparing for. The chance to step fully into the life he'd been afraid to claim. He looked at James, who nodded, his eyes steady. "We're ready," Ethan said, and for the first time, he believed it. The road ahead would be hard work. Family, society, but with James and Noah, he had something worth fighting for. Sarah's move to Seattle marked a turning point. Ethan and James leased a small house together, a cozy 2-bedroom with a backyard for Noah. The move was chaotic: boxes, tantrums, and late-night arguments about furniture, but it felt like a beginning. Ethan watched James assemble a crib with the same care he'd once put into his art, and the sight stirred something deep. This was their life now, messy but theirs. Noah adapted quickly, calling James Jay in a way that made Ethan's heart swell. But the transition wasn't seamless. Ethan's co-workers grew distant, their whispers louder after he updated his relationship status online. One night, a brick was thrown through their living room window. A scrawled note attached: "Fags don't belong here." Ethan's hands shook as he swept up the glass. Noah asleep upstairs, James's face pale but resolute. "We can't let this stop us," James said, his voice firm. "Noah needs to see us stand tall." Ethan nodded, but fear gnawed at him. He called the police, who took a report but offered little hope. The incident left Ethan hypervigilant, checking locks obsessively, jumping at every noise. James suggested therapy, and Ethan reluctantly agreed. The sessions were raw, forcing him to confront the shame he'd carried since childhood. "You're not broken," the therapist said. "You're learning to live authentically." The words were simple, but they hit hard. Ethan started opening up to James about his fears, his guilt, the weight of his parents' rejection. James listened, never pushing, always there. They built routines: Saturday pancakes, bedtime stories, trips to the park. Noah's laughter filled the gaps where doubt lingered. But the outside world remained a challenge. Ethan's parents cut contact completely, and his boss issued a formal warning about distractions at work. Ethan considered quitting, but James encouraged him to fight. "You're good at your job," he said. "Don't let them push you out." One evening, James surprised Ethan with a small painting, a vibrant abstract of 2 figures holding a child, their colors blending into a bright horizon. "It's us," James said, his voice soft. "The family we're making." Ethan hung it in the living room, a reminder of what they were building, even as the world tried to tear it down. Sarah visited for Noah's first weekend with them as primary caregivers. She was impressed, her smile genuine as she watched James teach Noah to kick a soccer ball. "You're doing good," she told Ethan. "He's happy." Her words eased the knot in Ethan's chest, but he knew the hard part was far from over. As winter set in, Ethan and James faced their biggest challenge yet: a custody hearing. Sarah had agreed to joint custody, but Ethan's parents filed a petition, claiming he and James were unfit. The news hit like a gut punch. Ethan's fear returned, sharper now, threatening to unravel everything they'd built. James held his hand, their fingers intertwined. "We'll fight," he said. "For Noah." Ethan nodded, his resolve hardening. He'd hidden for too long, but now, with James and Noah by his side, he was ready to face whatever came next. The hearing loomed, but so did their Futuria family, forged not just by love, but by the courage to live it. The custody hearing was held in a sterile Chicago courtroom, the air thick with tension. Ethan sat beside James, their lawyer, a fierce advocate from a local LGBTQ+ organization, reviewing notes. Across the room, Ethan's parents sat stone-faced, their lawyer arguing that Noah needed a stable, traditional environment. Each word was a dagger, slicing through Ethan's resolve, but James's steady hand on his kept him grounded. Their lawyer presented evidence of Ethan and James's commitment, Noah's thriving health, their stable home, Sarah's support. Sarah testified via video, her voice clear. Ethan and James are Noah's fathers. They love him, and he loves them. Ethan's eyes stung, gratitude mixing with fear as his mother took the stand, her testimony laced with judgment. Ethan's lifestyle is a choice, she said. It's not right for a child. Ethan wanted to scream, to tell her she was wrong, but he stayed silent, trusting their lawyer. James squeezed his hand, whispering, "We've got this." The judge, a stern woman with kind eyes, listened carefully, her questions probing but fair. When Ethan took the stand, he spoke from the heart. "I hid who I was for years because I was afraid. But I'm not hiding anymore. Noah deserves a dad who's honest, who loves him fiercely. That's who I am now." The hearing stretched over days, each one draining. Outside the courtroom, Ethan and James faced reporters, their story picking up local attention. Some headlines were supportive, others cruel, but Ethan focused on Noah, who waited at home with Emily. They'd promised him a trip to the planetarium if they won, a small bribe to keep his spirits high. The judge's ruling came on a snowy afternoon. Ethan held his breath as she spoke. Noah's best interests lie with the parents who prioritize his well-being. Ethan Cole and James Harper have demonstrated that commitment. Custody was granted to them, with Sarah retaining visitation rights. Ethan's parents' petition was denied. Ethan collapsed into James's arms, tears streaming down his face. They'd won not just for Noah, but for themselves. As they left the courthouse, snow falling softly, Ethan felt a weight lift. His parents' rejection still hurt, but it no longer defined him. That night, they celebrated with Noah, ordering pizza and dancing to silly music in their living room. Emily joined them, her pride evident. "You did it," she said, hugging Ethan. "You're finally you." Later, as Noah slept, Ethan and James sat on the couch, the painting James had made glowing under the lamplight. "I want to marry you," Ethan said suddenly, the words spilling out. James's eyes widened, then softened. "Then ask me properly," he teased. Ethan laughed, the sound free and light. He took James's hand, his voice steady. "James Harper, will you marry me?" James grinned, pulling him close. "Yes." The moment felt like a promise, not just to each other, but to the life they were building. The world outside still held challenges, but inside their home, with Noah's toys scattered and James's warmth beside him, Ethan finally felt whole. Spring brought renewal. Ethan and James planned a small wedding in their backyard, with Noah as ring bearer and Emily officiating. Sarah flew in from Seattle, her smile bright as she helped decorate with fairy lights and wildflowers. The guest list was small friends who'd stood by them, co-workers who'd come around, and a few neighbors who'd apologized after the brick incident. Ethan's parents weren't invited, a choice that hurt but felt right. The ceremony was simple but profound. Ethan's vows were raw. "I spent 9 years hiding, but you never gave up on me. You're my home, James, and I'll spend every day proving it." James's vows were quieter but just as fierce. "I loved you then. I love you now, and I'll love you always. We're a family." Noah, oblivious to the weight of the moment, clapped as they kissed, the crowd cheering. Life settled into a rhythm. Ethan found a new job at a more inclusive company, his confidence growing. James restarted his art career, his paintings gaining local attention. Noah thrived, his laughter a constant reminder of why they'd fought so hard. Sarah visited often, her bond with Noah unbreakable, her friendship with Ethan and James a testament to their unconventional family. Challenges remained. Some neighbors still whispered, and Ethan's parents sent occasional letters, pleading for reconciliation on their terms. Ethan responded once, politely but firmly, "I'm happy." Noah's happy. That's what matters. He never heard back, and while it stung, he no longer needed their approval. One evening, as they tucked Noah into bed, James pulled Ethan into the backyard, where the fairy lights still hung. "Look at what we've built," he said, his arm around Ethan's waist. The house glowed behind them, filled with love, mess, and life. Ethan leaned into him, the weight of 9 years finally gone. Their story wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. Ethan had hidden his truth for too long, but through Sarah's courage, James's love, and Noah's light, he'd found his way. They were a family not traditional, but real, forged by honesty and the bravery to love openly. As the stars emerged above, Ethan knew they'd face whatever came next together, and that was enough.